Excuse me, Professor, you're muted. Excuse me, Professor, we can't hear you.
Professor Heller, you're muted. Professor, you are muted.
Professor, you're muted.
Maybe if we say it all at the same time.
You're muted, Professor.
Oh boy, he's muted. So muted. You're not hear a single thing.
Does someone want to make a sign?
Professor, re-plug in your microphone, maybe.
Makes for good comedy, at least.
Does he have us muted too?
I'm assuming he can't hear us.
I think so.
Yeah. Professor,
Nice.
excuse me. We can't hear you.
We could all try to probably message him. That's what I did. I don't know if he'll see it.
He's definitely not gonna see it. I don't think he knows what that is.
True.
We have this thing on.
Well, see how this goes today.
Oh man.
We need someone who can read lips.
I don't know if he's looking at the screen, though, because he can't see the signs.
You might have to just put your signs on a stand in front of the camera and just, I guess, hope that he sees it.
Well, he's not doing anything with his screen, so maybe he's getting help from someone.
You would think he would say something by now.
Someone wrote on his screen, and he still doesn't know.
Maybe try posting in chat how to unmute yourself.
I don't think
Doesn't
he's
he have that lady that comes and helps him? Isn't there someone that like is in his house all the time helping him?
Yeah,
Everyone
I
should turn
thought
off their
so.
cameras and change their name to Professor You're Muted.
I don't think he's seeing the Zoom screen right now.
I don't think he's looking at anything. I think he's just talking.
Clearly
He's
saying.
vibing.
He's living his best life at the moment.
And funny though.
Well, I guess send him an email, and hopefully we'll have the full lecture up on YouTube.
Unless he's muted in the lecture as well.
Yeah, he would be.
Oh, fantastic.
This is awesome.
Why can't he hear us?
I understand.
Because he muted us too, obviously.
His volume must be off.
Yeah, but this time he doesn't have his headphones on. Like, remember last time he did? But this time I think he forgot.
Maybe they're plugged in, yeah, and he doesn't have them on.
Well, like, is he not even looking at us? Because we've all been holding up signs, so.
Well, he's
Oh, he's
sharing
got it,
his
he's got it
screen.
minimized, so he's probably not looking at it, I guess.
Yeah, I don't.
We gotta
think
hope that he
there's any
comes
way-
back. to
I'm
Zoom
thinking
and sees us.
12:42. 12:42, he'll realize.
Nah, 12:50.
So I guess
12:55.
Yeah, we're putting bets down.
Yeah, I'll put like a $2 bet that he doesn't come back until like 1.
Price is right rules.
I'll take the. Hey, quick question. In the syllabus, it says there's like discussion groups. Do we still have that, or?
I think he,
No idea.
Okay.
I think he may have realized. I think.
I
Yeah,
like the
he
Discord
realized.
chat.
Yeah. We are saved.
I think he's realizing. He's not talking anymore.
This is just comical, honestly.
Yeah.
How did you get to behind his screen?
Oh my
You
god.
can annotate if you view options.
Yeah. And does he not see that?
I don't
He
know.
should be able to.
You
That's
should
weird.
be seeing it.
Yeah,
but
it's
I
all over. Yeah.
I tried privately messaging him. Maybe you'll see it.
I tried.
I PM'd him as well.
I feel bad. I mean, he's just giving his lecture to himself at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So someone mentioned the lady who comes in and helps him
Yeah.
with all the technical
I
stuff.
want to see her at this moment.
I don't know who that is though.
Remember one of my other professors saying that the university only really provides support for WebEx?
Yeah.
So that's probably why she's not coming in right now, helping.
Well, wasn't there a lady in the chat in one of these classes where she was just chilling, ready to help?
I think so.
I thought there was like a lady that wasn't a student that was in our class, but I don't.
I think she might have been a student.
Maybe
Yeah.
a TA or something.
That lady might have been a relative of his, because that looks like his home. But
Yeah. And she
Really?
was, yeah.
She may be a TA or a grad student or something.
Yeah.
I wonder when he will notice.
Maybe when he asks us to understand.
Let's all leave, then he'll notice.
That would make him notice, probably.
No, see, I don't think he would.
Wow.
No,
because
he
he's
wouldn't
not
even notice.
checking
Never
the
mind.
numbers.
He's not even in Zoom.
No.
Are we recorded?
I'm just wondering
It says
because
it's
we're
recording.
viewing his screen right now.
But is it recording what we're saying as well?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It definitely is.
What we're saying, not what he's saying. Because his microphone is off.
And
What
then he'll
we're
put
saying
this
is just we
lecture on
wanted to unmute
YouTube.
it.
This is gonna be pretty good on YouTube later.
I wonder what his screen is, because it's definitely not the Zoom meeting.
He's probably just seeing like the actual screen, just not the Zoom screen, so he doesn't see the writing on it.
I think he's just looking at his map. That's it.
But we did this in our bio lab, and they could see what we wrote. So I don't know how he can't. Like they could see us writing on it if you can annotate.
Would he have the technical know-how to like do a recorded lecture and then post it on Zoom like this?
I don't think
Maybe with the help of his assistant, but
I doubt it's pre-recorded. He's usually telling people to turn off their mics all the time and stuff. So.
yeah.
keeps telling everyone he did himself.
This is kind of sad.
I can't wait to hear his reaction once he figures it out.
He's lecturing so hard right now. None of us can hear.
Almost.
I was trying to think if there's anything we can do, but I think we've exhausted all our options.
I tried phoning
All of
him.
us leave. We could do that.
He doesn't answer his phone and he won't see his email until after.
Yeah.
Probably it's probably an office phone too, so it might not even be his house.
We just gotta hope that he comes back to Zoom.
At the end.
All right, I'm gonna go make lunch.
Oh, блин.
So, Stanley Cup tonight.
No, it's Chiefs and Ravens tonight.
Yeah, that's where it's at. There you go.
Yeah.
Who you got?
Tampa's gonna win tonight.
Who?
Yeah, Tampa.
Tampa.
Oh, Tampa for
Tampa.
sure.
Yeah, not Dallas. No way.
Not a chance.
Yeah, I think I got Dallas and the Ravens.
Nah, Chiefs will win. Lamar can't play from behind.
Chiefs just played so brutal last week.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter because they have Patrick Mahomes. He's better.
I think you may have figured it out.
Hello?
Hey.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
You just
You are unmuted right now.
I've
Oh, and you're muted again. You have to press the button again. Sorry.
Uh-oh.
Professor, you're still muted.
Oh no.
you're still muted, Professor.
Professor, your microphone is off.
There we go. Oh.
Oh, no, you muted it again.
Press it once.
There. No.
There we go. Oh, yeah.
There we go. It's good.
Nope.
You're still muted.
Professor, your microphone is off.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you.
You can hear me.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so basically.
You've been muted the
just
whole
be
time,
briefly
Professor.
reviewed. If I assume you can hear me now. These newly constituted states,
Professor.
which I've described, they were in perpetual rivalry with one another. They were fighting one another. That had to be paid for through taxes.
Professor, you've been muted
Professor.
since the start of class.
Suffered a net
He can't hear
loss
us.
from paying
I'm
these taxes.
messaging him
Became
privately and
increasingly
he responded.
heavy because war cost more and more. And furthermore, they were suffering devastation
Can't hear
from
us.
these wars. On the other hand, what's amazing
Sorry.
is that the monarchies gradually realized, I would say, starting
But I
with the
think we're
English
out
monarchy,
where we were before,
French,
roughly.
and then all of these
This is not better.
realized that they needed to
No
Yeah,
idea
develop.
what's
we're
happening.
starting from when you left off.
And so the kings began to promote more modern agriculture and industry. And in fact, it's this, the governments played a large role in economic development from the late 16th century, from about 1580 onwards. You see governments intervening more and more in the economy to stimulate internal economic growth in order to get the resources to basically participate in this competitive political situation. We call this competitive rivalry the so-called European balance of power. The European balance of power is what it's referred to. Now, having sort of described Europe as it was from the 16th century onward from a political point of view, I want to talk about something else for most of the rest of the session. I want to talk about a major cultural development, which is basically called the rise of humanism. Humanism, and I think I have a yes, humanism right here. And the people who were leaders of this movement were referred to as humanists. And the first of these humanists, actually this Boccaccio is spelled incorrectly. Boccaccio should be spelled Boccaccio. These people came from Florence in northern Italy. They came from the city of Florence in northern Italy, and they all lived essentially in the 14th century. This movement, as a matter of fact, started amongst the wealthy merchant class in northern Italy. As you know, northern Italy, Venice, Milan, Florence, and the other cities were the richest places in Europe. They were in directly contact with the Middle East. They, their leaders, their merchant leaders, were also involved in banking, They developed the most luxury textile industry in Europe. And so these northern Italian cities were the focal point of great cultural activity. One aspect of this, of course, are the great painters. I'm sure you've seen painting by people like Leonardo da Vinci or Raphael. These rich merchants and bankers were their patrons. They paid for these paintings. And on the other hand, they also employed these so-called humanists. And the humanists were basically literary scholars who knew Latin and even Greek. They knew the ancient languages. They began to create, the most famous of these are these three initial people, Dante, Petrarch, and Boccaccio, who were creative literary artists. They wrote poetry and stories that have remained famous throughout the ages. Their successors, less well known, Bruni, Salutate, and Valla were essentially scholars. But what one should understand here is this again, I noted the fact that the middle class provided the money for the territorial monarchies. And the middle class is the dynamic element in society, really from the 15th century onwards. There, of course, are the nobles and there are the clergy, but it's the middle class that is animating the whole society. They're the ones who are obviously animating a society from an economic point of view, but they're also providing the money for the new states. And they also are the ones who basically invented the new ocean-going sailing vessels. It was from the middle class that rifles and cannons, basically the invention and development of these things were through the middle class itself. So and furthermore, it is the middle class in the middle of the 15th century that invents the printed book, which greatly cheapens the cost of literature and reading. As a matter of fact, from the middle of the 15th century onwards, thousands, indeed hundreds of thousands of books are printed for the first time. So they're transforming the whole basis of economic and cultural life. And one of the features of this is humanism that I'm speaking about. These humanists were all middle-class people. They were the sons of merchants and wealthy townsmen. Some of these sons became scholars. And what was their idea? What did the humanists want to do? Well, they wanted to go back to what they considered to be the golden age. And the golden age for them was not, of course, the Middle Ages, which were dominated by essentially the church and the hated aristocrats who were constantly fighting women. No, they wanted to go back to what they considered the golden age of civilization, which they considered the period of the Greeks and the Romans. So the humanists were all about somehow turning the clock back. I might say the clock was invented in Europe in the 14th century. Turning the clock back to Greek and Roman antiquity was the goal of these humanists. Now that, to us, that's very strange because we still have this lingering idea that we're looking toward the future, our personal future and the future of humankind. Things are moving forward and somehow they will be better. Now this idea of course, today is in question. I mean, you only have to think about your own worries about your future. But the whole of humankind is, of course, at the moment, doubting whether actually there might or might not be a future. The future, which had always been in recent centuries, everybody assumed that society would progress indefinitely into the future. Well, today you have movies being made about dystopias, about the future is basically going to be barbarism or even worse. Well, this is a new thing because of the general pessimism that's settled over the world in recent years, and I'm not going into that today. But there was no idea of progress really before the 18th century. No, people looked backwards to this so-called golden age of the Greeks and the Romans. And the humanists, the outstanding thing that the humanists did was they tried to bring back this culture. They ransacked old libraries, usually found in church buildings, for old manuscripts. And they discovered dozens and dozens of the writings of the great thinkers of antiquity. I'm talking about Plato and Aristotle, Cicero and Seneca. You may vaguely have heard these names. Well, the manuscripts of all of these people were rediscovered by the humanists in the 15th and 16th century. And because the printed book had been discovered, the humanists prepared special editions and they printed all of this literature. And they opened schools in which this classical Greek and Roman learning was taught. So there was this great revival of the thought, the culture, the literature of the ancient world brought about by these humanists who first were centered in Italy. The humanist movement started in Italy in the 14th century, continued into the 15th century and beyond, but then gradually around about 1500, it spread into Northern Europe. It spread into France and England, the Netherlands, etc. Now, it's important to realize what this meant. It meant that whereas in the Middle Ages, the church had been the dominant cultural institution, and the church basically taught, a basic thing that they taught was prepare yourself for the afterlife, disengage from the world. The world is not important. Making yourself acceptable to God was what counted. And even they counseled basically limit the pleasures that the material world has to offer. So the church it taught. I'm not saying that the churchmen actually lived up to it, but this is what they taught. At the same time, the landlords basically taught war and aggression, to be brave, to be loyal in war was what the nobility were all about. But the humanists, based on their reading of the ancient world, the thinkers of the ancient world, taught a wholly different approach. Because in the first place, they extolled the idea of individual development, not loyalty to the group as the church or as the warriors, not loyalty to the group, but the development of the individual was the highest value that the humanists espoused. but they also put a lot of stress on a kind of practical morality and rationality. Indeed, you know, in the sense that you can see they praised people because they were ambitious, because they accumulated money. They didn't apologize for the existence of wealth. No, if an individual could maximize their wealth, they considered it a good thing. Practical thinking that accomplished something, and virtue that was not simply based on a withdrawal from the world, but actually a virtue that actually had practical effects in the world, including helping your state, whether your state was Venice or Milan or Florence. What they called civic virtue was very important to them. So that these people were the humanists espoused what we can call a worldly morality, including this idea of accumulating worldly wealth as a good thing. This is a great contrast to the teachings of the major institutions in the Middle Ages. And it's obviously a reflection of a new culture. It's a middle-class culture. It's a culture that arises and refines the morality of the marketplace, if you understand my meaning. It's the first expression, and it's very important. When a class is becoming powerful, is increasing in its influence, you can see that it begins to express itself culturally. So the fact that the middle class was, through this humanism, was beginning to express its worldview is an extremely important new development. Now, most of these humanists, although they, for example, appreciated money and even said that engaging in love was a good thing, even physical love was a good thing, the humanists, for the most part, were sincere Christians. They were still Christians. But they were increasingly critical of the church. And in Italy in particular, there was growing criticism of the popes in Rome. The papacy came under attack. Why? Because they said that the popes were too wealthy. They said that the popes were not practicing proper morality. They were committing all kinds of venal sins, including a profligate sexuality. And moreover, they were cynically using religion in order to advance the political interests of the Roman papacy. So the humanists more and more began to attack the papacy, the Pope in Rome. And this attack, what we call anti-clericalism, hostility to the church, and particularly to the popes, was especially embodied in the work of the most important humanists that Italy at least produced, and probably the most important humanist overall, an individual from Florence by the name of Machiavelli, who in 1515 published what came to be one of the essential works of this whole early modern period, this whole, we refer to it as the Renaissance. Niccolo Machiavelli from Florence, who basically made a career as a diplomat, one of the senior officials of the Florentine state. Now, he was forced out of office eventually, and he spent his retirement writing The Prince and a number of works. And The Prince became his great work. And the reason he wrote The Prince is that Machiavelli felt that Italy was basically in the middle of a tragedy, because Spain, France, and England were becoming, under their kings, were becoming unified states. And these kings were invading Italy and were destroying the political independence of the Italian state. And he believed the only way that Italy could be saved was through the emergence of a great prince who would overcome all the disunities, including the opposition of the popes, and by force and by cunning, basically unify Italy into a single unified state, which could contend with the threats from Spain, from France, and from England. And so Machiavelli, he, in The Prince, tried to basically paint a picture or depict what he conceived to be the ideal prince. Now, this book was absolutely without precedent, because what he said, the main thing he said was that the ends justify the means. That is to say, if the end is to establish princely rule, if the end is to basically achieve power, and his ultimate goal was to create an Italian state, but he said that all means, violence, trickery, duplicity, war, all means that were generally considered to be immoral, were justified in the pursuit of the goal of basically achieving political power. And he was very critical of the popes because they were the main obstacle, to say nothing about their corruption and so on. But basically, on the matter of religion, he was outspoken in the sense that he exposed the hypocrisy of the popes, who used religion as a means to achieve their political goals. And as a matter of fact, what Machiavelli said was, yeah, indeed, let the prince use religion. Let him pretend to be pious and holy in order to fool the people. In order to fool the people, the ruler has to pretend to be a religious good man. But behind the scenes, he should do whatever he wants and whatever he can in order to further his ends. The rational calculation of means to this political goal. Religion becomes simply a tool. Now, this had never happened before in the history of Western Christendom. Maybe some people had some thoughts like this, but Machiavelli comes into the open with these kinds of thoughts. And this creates a kind of intellectual revolution. Machiavelli's book, although many in public condemn Machiavelli, the fact is that they were eagerly reading him as a kind of manual for how to behave. And so Machiavelli, Machiavellian thought, the thought of Machiavelli, this amoral political morality began to become more and more the way politicians saw things. And as a matter of fact, let's go further and say Machiavelli's ideas are basically the ideas of successful merchants in the marketplace. Even today, you'll see businessmen who write books about Machiavelli. Machiavelli is the guide to doing business. So Machiavelli's influence, I conclude, was enormous. Now, lest you think that the humanists were all like this, take a look at a complete contrast. Thomas More, he was a humanist from England. By this point, humanism had spread to England. And More was completely different from Machiavelli. Machiavelli was all about the individual, and More was all about the community. He reasserted the idea of community because what he said that a market society dominated by merchants was essentially evil. And the utopia depicts a perfect, and some would say unrealistic, communist community. This is the first communist work in the history of Western civilization. So first, it sets out what a perfect communist community would look like, how people could actually live by sharing property. There would be no private property. And where did Moore get his ideas? He got his ideas partly from Plato, one of the great ancient thinkers. Remember, I told you that the humanists looked to the ancients, but also he heard reports about the Aboriginals, the so-called Indians of North America, that they were living, sharing property. And so this was another source of Moore's ideas. And finally, he got these ideas from the New Testament, from what he found in the New Testament. The early Christian communities seemed to share their wealth. And so Moore absorbed this idea. So we have the humanists who try to get back to antiquity. We have Machiavelli, who bases himself on the ancient thinkers, but also on his observations of modern politics, and comes up with this extremely radical book, The Prince. And Moore, reacting against the growing influence of money in the marketplace, takes the view that communism is better. Now, looking at another aspect of this humanist movement, we see that it began to spread beyond the middle class, beyond the republics of Italy, and it began to influence the new monarchies, the royal courts that were established by the French, the British, the English, and the Spanish, because these royal courts, which were part of the apparatus of the state, I told you that the French court had 8,000 courtiers. Well, the question was, how does a courtier become successful? How does a nobleman arriving at court make his way and ingratiate himself with the king? And Castiglione, this diplomat, he actually worked for the King of Spain, wrote a book which was published in the 1520s called The Courtier. Castiglione is of Italian origin, but he worked for Spain. And Castiglione basically said that the courtier can achieve the favor of a king, and the favor of the king is absolute everything to these noblemen who now they can't be independent of the king. They're dependent on the king. They want to be appointed to a high post of office in the state. They have to, or to receive a pension or whatever, they have to look to the monarchy. Castiglione basically tells them, you have to become gentlemen. You have to become gentlemen. Or, as he otherwise puts it, you have to become all-rounded men or women, because he includes women in this discussion of the courtier. And basically, certainly you have to study the art of war. To be a nobleman, you have to know how to use your sword and how to fight, but you also have to know how to dance. And you also have to get an education, a humanist education, an education in the classical writers. You need a classical education. You have to study and read the classical writers in order to learn to be literate, to appreciate art and literature, to be rational, how to be polite, how to restrain yourself, All of these things are to be found in the classical writers. And so in order to turn yourself into a full gentleman or lady, a fully rounded personality, you have to basically study the humanists and the humanist writers. Now, this is one aspect of this idea of to become civilized, if you like. But another aspect that we have to pay particular attention is the fact that this idea of the gentleman, of the all-rounded individual who was a nobleman. Let's not forget, we're talking about the nobility now. It was also, in a way, a means by which the gentlemen, the nobles, could distinguish themselves and justify their dominance over the common people. It was a way in which they said, well, we are, with our education, our humanist education, our refinement at the table, our appreciation of literature and the arts, we're different from the boorish peasants or the vulgar townsmen. And as a matter of fact, we're different from the irrational, ignorant peoples that we find in Africa, in Latin America. In other words, to be a European gentleman, in a way, was used as a kind of ideological justification for ruling over and quote unquote civilizing the peoples of the third world. It became part of the colonialist ideology, is what I'm saying. And so this is another aspect of this humanism that has to be borne in mind. I think at this point, I want to basically bring up an image, if I can find this. No, this is not good. Yes, I've got it now. Here we have an image of the Emperor Charles V. Remember Charles V, the emperor who wanted to create a new Roman Empire. Here we see, this is a sculpture by the artist Leone. And what we see is the Emperor Charles V clothed in the armor of a Roman emperor. And at his feet is either a black slave, chained at his feet is the image of a black slave, or it could be an indigenous person. And so we see that the Europeans, basically especially the ruling class, developed this incredible sense of superiority over the peoples of the third world, which plays and continued to play a very important role, conversion to the Christian religion and basically civilizing the third world peoples. Never mind the fact that they had their own civilization. That China had been a civilization as long as the Europeans, but this was the European elite's conception of their mission. Now, farther we come to, now I said that Machiavelli was the most important Italian humanist. Well, in Northern Europe, and here we're beginning to anticipate, oh, sorry, the class is over.